Welcome to episode 270 of the Working Fans Podcast, where today we will be presenting our interview with author Ray Lopez about his upcoming book, Lockup: Professional Wrestling in Our World. We recorded this interview last week, and we didn't know when we were going to release it, but we were so excited after talking to Ray about this that we want to present it to you this week. Now, Lockup dives headfirst into the colorful world of professional wrestling, explore the iconic characters, careers, matches, history, and families, and delve into the bizarre and fascinating entwining of professional wrestling in film, television, football, politics, gender, and race. You are going to love this book, and this interview with Ray Lopez is brought to you by Game Up Hard Hydration. It's like your favorite sports drink and your favorite seltzer got together, but it's so much better. 4 great flavors: orange, lemon lime, grape, and fruit punch. Comes in an 8-pack, low carb, 110 calories per can. Get yourself some Game Up and get Lockup: Professional Wrestling in Our World. Link is available in the comments. Get yourself a copy today.
Welcome to the Working Fans Podcast, where we are very excited about this because, here at the Working Fans Podcast, we're very excited about wrestling books. We've talked about WrestleBill. We've talked about Wrestle Black Bart, but we have one today with an author who got a hold of us. It's the man called Dave. It's producer Joe. And we are here to talk about the upcoming book, Lockup: Professional Wrestling in Our World, with lawyer, author Raymond Lopez. Ray, how are you doing today? Is it okay if I call you Ray?
Ray's perfectly fine. Hey guys, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no problem, Ray. Thanks for doing
we're
this.
We're very excited to hear.
Fans.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you here. We're very excited about the book. But before we get to talking about the book, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up a fan? Who got you into wrestling? Let us know everything from the start.
Sure thing, guys. Well, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. I've been a wrestling fan since, I can't remember. Back in the day, in the early 90s, I had the wrestling sheets, the little monitos, all that jazz. And, I really remember my first wrestling match. It's kind of a sad story. My grandfather was about to pass away. And my birthday was like right around that period of time. So instead of having a birthday party, my parents didn't want to do that. All the family members were just not in the mood. Everybody was already kind of in the mourning phase. But they didn't want my birthday to pass without any acknowledgement, so to speak. So they said, well, WWE is coming into town. And I think it was like 2 days after my birthday. It's like, well, what if we get you tickets and we all go to watch the WWE show? And, fantastic. So I was sold 100%. It's like, oh yeah, this is 10 times better than a birthday party with some cake and, all that jazz. So I've been a fan since growing up and, ever since.
As you're telling that story, for some reason, you made me think of me, like when I was watching wrestling and when I got into it. And I never really thought about it at the time, but I think wrestling was just that escape for me. And it sounds like maybe for you, everything you were going through at that time. And one thing I remember too, specifically about when I really got into my era of wrestling, it's a little before that, was Hogan had just won the title and Piper cracked over the coconut over Snooker and that. What are some specific instances or wrestlers you remember that you were really, really hooked on in that era?
Well, I remember the Macho Man. I was a big Macho Man fan. Of course, Hogan as well. I remember when Earthquake and the Snake, that was devastating. And so was when Macho Man, and I was a little kid at the time, when he got bit by Jake Snake, that was like almost traumatizing. But yeah, I was a huge Macho fan and a Hogan fan. I guess those were my guys growing up.
That's awesome. It sounds like you're in that same era with us where it was like 80s wrestling, 90s wrestling. Now you became a lawyer. You're now working on being an author. Have you always been a wrestling fan through that whole time, or did you ever take any time off?
Sure. I suppose when I was in law school, especially that first year, was kind of like you're kind of doing it almost 24/7. If you're not in class, you're studying afterwards. And if you're not doing that, you're like social events, networking with your peers and all that jazz. So for that, like first couple of years of law school, I kind of had to take a break from it just because I was just too busy. But, when I did eventually become a lawyer, pass on and had more free time down the road, I kind of went back and rewatched and caught up on what I had missed for those past years. But yeah, unfortunately, it had been a period of time when I was just working from, sun up to sundown and didn't have time for pretty much anything else, really.
I was wondering, do you ever find like your clients are surprised you're a wrestling fan, or do you ever bond with them over wrestling when not talking about like the work at hand.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. Some people might be surprised because they may think that it's not a lot of wrestling fans or lawyers, but I think it's kind of like it's refreshing to a lot of people that just not some stuffy lawyer that only reads Shakespeare and listens to operas. And I enjoy some of the stuff that everybody enjoys. So I kind of think it's refreshing to folks. It's like, oh yeah, he's kind of like one of us. He's not as snooty type of guy. He loves going to wrestling shows just like I do. So I think it's been a positive thing to connect with people.
That was kind of going to be a similar question I was going to ask, actually. Was I remember listening to Conrad Thompson's podcast. He had those friends, Mike Dawkins, who was like a gimmick attorney, like I did like for all the different copyrights and stuff. And I was just wondering, do you run into any lawyers who are wrestling fans too ever?
I do. I have many friends, and especially when I told them about the book, or I'd see them at events and with the kids, and they were wearing like wrestling shirts, like, oh, you like wrestling too? So they are out there. There's definitely more than people think. I think this is a great time when people are finally not ashamed to be like, oh yeah, I like wrestling, I like Cody, I like Roman, I like even the current product. Maybe in years past people would have been like, oh yeah, I like wrestling. People are like, you mean when you were a kid? You don't mean today. But I think we're kind of past that era, and now some of the shame or stigma around being a wrestling fan is really kind of gone. That everybody, it's kind of mainstream, and people get it. I think people are getting it, and it's a great product right now.
What are some stuff you're enjoying right now in wrestling?
Well, I'm a big WWE fan. I also like AEW and a lot of stuff they're doing. I thought WWE was a real hard spot after coming off that original Bloodline storyline with Jey Uso and the turn and all that stuff. I mean, that was just so good. It was such great storytelling. It's kind of like, where do you go from there? Like, how do we keep this rolling? And I know, like, Heyman said, hey, we're only in the fourth inning of the story. Y'all hang on. But to me, it's like, I don't know. We might start getting to that NWO territory where it's like, before you know it, the story's kind of soured and turned lame. But I really think they've done a good job. I love that they gave Jey Uso the IC title. I think that's super well deserved. I was excited for him. I love the emotion to start off Raw. I mean, Rhea and Dom and the Liv, that whole angle, that's been great. I do like what they're doing in AEW. I like Danielson, the plastic bag. I know that was super controversial. I get it. That wasn't my cup of tea, but I can stomach it and be like, okay, well, they give us so much good stuff that, I kind of don't like the plastic bag thing. I think that cuts a little too close to reality. If somebody puts a plastic bag over my head, I'm probably not going to put them in a headlock after that. Things are going to escalate to like a point where we don't want to go, and it's kind of getting to a dark area. So I wish they would tone that back a little bit. But I mean, they're doing a great job too.
Let's get to the reason you're here. You reached out to us because you wrote a book, Lock Up: Professional Wrestling in Our World. I gotta ask, being a lawyer, how did you find time to write a book, and where did the idea to write the book come from?
Great question. This was a COVID project when COVID first started, so it's been in the works for quite some time. So when COVID started, the courthouse, here, as I'm sure everywhere, shut down for months before people kind of figured out how to do it and transition to Zoom. And even when you were on Zoom, there was a lot of extra time because you didn't have to drive 30 minutes down to the courthouse. You didn't have to sit there and wait. Or if you were waiting, you were on your computer, so you could be working on other things while you were waiting. So kind of time opened up a little bit at that point. And I also needed a project to keep me from just kind of bouncing off the walls and like, what can I sink my teeth into to use all this time, because we're not going out, we're not going to work like I used to. So I just figured like, well, maybe I could try to write a book about wrestling. And that's kind of how the project started. And I've been working on it since, really since then. So it's years in the making, and we got finally so far. We took a little break after COVID opened up and things kind of got back to normal. But then I was like, man, come so far with it. I gotta finish this thing out. So that's kind of where I found the time. A lot of it was a COVID project that probably would never have found the time had all that stuff not happened.
What were some of the biggest challenges you would say in writing this book?
Well, the stories of professional wrestling have been told over and over again. A lot of the stuff and the topics that are talked about. So trying to find a way to put things in a unique, different type of perspective, something that people hadn't seen before, that was challenging. I've read a lot of professional wrestling books, I'm sure y'all have. And to me, a lot of them fall down into two categories, either biographical works or autobiographical works, or they're historical works that talk about certain periods of time. So just trying to figure out a new way, a new type of book to do that was definitely challenging.
Nice. Yeah, there are plenty of wrestling books out there. Were there any wrestling books that inspired you for a way to put this book together? or were there any wrestling books that you wanted to avoid kind of falling in that trap?
I haven't seen any books that are kind of framed the way I have. I was a big fan, still am a big fan of Shoemaker's, the Masked Man's book. What was it called? I think somewhere here behind me. The Square Circle one. It was a great book. I thought that was a solid, interesting take, the way he broke down different wrestlers. And not necessarily like the mainstream guys that everybody's heard of, but biographical to some of the people that we don't know a lot about. So I say Shoemaker's was a big book that I drew inspiration. Now, we have a completely different format than what Shoemaker did, but I really enjoyed his, and I drew inspiration from his work.
What are some of your favorite wrestling books?
Definitely, I liked the new Ric Flair book. That one was great. Andre's book was good. I think Mick Foley is just such a fantastic writer, even not even just as a wrestler, just as a writer. So, I really loved his books. I love Jericho's first book was great, too. Bret Hart's book was very interesting to get in his mentality of he's very serious about it. Some might even say too serious about how he takes his craft. But, I say Mick Foley's he's a good author. I mean, even if you weren't into wrestling books, you'd love.
It took me a second. I actually thought I had the David Shoemaker book kicking around.
That's the one. That's a great book as well.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I get excited about wrestling books and the chance to interview authors. Like when you reached out to us, I was like, I know I want to talk to him because it's always interesting when you have a fan that's so dedicated that wants to make a book about it. So what can you tell people to kind of what's in this book? Like, how did you decide to present things without giving away too much?
Yeah, I think this book is kind of broken down into 3 things. Now, there's 13 chapters, and they're all individual one-by-one chapters. So you don't have to read them in order. You can bounce around to whatever topic you want. Now, some of the chapters are a little more academic in nature. There's one called Race in the Ring, where we explore the treatment of people of color throughout kind of the history of professional wrestling, starting from a certain point and just in the evolution now. Same thing with the women's evolution. We have a chapter called Shattering Glass, where we kind of talk about these incidences where they've had and how they've been portrayed and how they work to where they're at now. We also have a lot of what I call like fan discussion chapters. So things that guys that were just talking wrestling would do. One of them is called the Square Circle Presidents. So the premise of this chapter is, we started from 1980 and we work our way up until 2024. And every 4 years, we're picking 2 wrestlers who are going to be basically the face of the industry, the entire industry, regardless of what promotion they're in. And then we kind of debate and we make a campaign for one wrestler, for the other wrestler. And then we kind of figure out who would be elected president in this particular year. We do that throughout the years to kind of have a fan discussion. Some of them are talking about culture, just the general culture, but we kind of try to put them in a unique way. One's called the Kaufmans, titled after, of course, the legendary Andy Kaufman. But we have an award show about wrestling and movies and film, best tag team performance in a movie, best film, best documentary about wrestling, best film about wrestling, best leading actor, best supporting actor, things like that. So we break it down and kind of just talk about some what I feel are pivotal roles for cinema and wrestling and the intermingling of them. We also got one that's kind of on that tail about a football draft. We're talking about the world of football, but we have almost a fantasy football style draft where we're only selecting wrestlers. And we put in some rules in place and we draw on wrestlers and we explain them why I think he would be a good wide receiver. Why would this guy be the quarterback? Who would we draft here? Who's going to be a linebacker? Who's going to be our tight end? Things like that. So there's a lot of stuff in it. We talk about some of the classic matches of all time. We have a match hall of fame where we break down certain matches and talk about their legacy, the actual match, all inclusive about that.
Nothing ever going to go perfect, but it just goes really good. Everything. Would you like to do more wrestling autobiographies or maybe some other books?
Yeah, I think we have an idea of a second book, but I've kind of brainstormed it and figured out the amount of time it might take. So it might be like a 5 to 10 year project, but especially now. But yes, I've got an idea for book number 2. We'll see if it ever pans out because I think it would be very time and labor intensive. And this one was as well. We have one where we have graphs of wrestlers kind of breaking down iconic wrestlers' careers. So there's 30 iconic wrestlers, and we break down their careers in certain ways. One, we break down what their gimmick was overall. The other one, we break down how much time each. So we spend how much time there is as a heel and a baby face, and then we spend out how much time there is each person spent as an active wrestler. Meaning we take their career and we subtract vacation times, injury times they had to step away for doing non-compete clauses. And we kind of try to put a timeline on okay, like Ric Flair, for instance, spent X amount of time is actually wrestling. And then we take it one step further and be like, well, how much time did he spend as a world champion, as a mid-tier champion, and how much time as a tag champion and as a lower card champion? So we put all these graphs in there. There's a lot of stuff. It took a lot of research to put all these together. But there's even, I think, the most hardcore fans would find facts and stuff that they wouldn't have known before. They wouldn't have known Ric Flair spent X percentage of his career holding that gold and this gold and overall gold. But we've done the work for you. So check out the book, and we have it's all there.
I love it. It's like a real fantasy wrestling nerd kind of vibe that I'm getting that I really want to check out. That's awesome.
I know. I was about to say, I didn't know what to expect from the book because you sent me the table of contents and I'm like looking at the titles and I'm like, this looks interesting, but I'm wondering what this is. But when I'm hearing you describe like the award show, hearing you describe putting out things like that people would debate sitting on their couch, it seems to have a very similar vibe to what Dave and I do. We've done a couple things like that, and the discussions really pull people in. So this sounds like it's a book that could be geared towards hardcore fans, people that are kind of, familiar with the business. And this must be like, how excited are you now that you're on the verge of finally releasing this? Is it more of an excitement? Is it more of a nervousness? Is it a little bit of both? Because hearing the way that you described it today, this makes me want to get like the pre-order right now because I want to see what this award show is like.
It's a combination of all feelings. I get excited, especially, we've gotten it out some copies of family and friends. I'm hearing good feedback. That's always welcome. That gets you excited. That gets you juiced. But then, of course, there's those moments where you're like, man, what if nobody likes this? What if, those thoughts try to start creeping into your head. So, just try to be positive. And, I am by no means the absolute expert on this. It's kind of like a discussion thing. You may disagree with who I selected as the president. You may not. But I think that's kind of the fun of the book. You don't have to, nobody has to agree with anything. But it's kind of gearing people to start thinking in their mind like, oh, well, he was wrong about this. He was right about that. Oh, I see what he was doing there. And yeah, there's a lot of excitement in the air. We're waiting for December to come out for the national release. So we're super excited about it and just trying to get it out there in front of fans because I really think once the fans, if they take a look at it and describing what it is to people is a challenge. But when they take a look at it and they hear about it, I think they'll dig it. I think they'll dig it. I think it'll be a fun read for them.
100%. And I wouldn't doubt that you're going to be successful because, you wrote the book when you had time. You're already thinking about a second book. So even if it doesn't pop off the way you thought, you're already in that positive mindset. And you can't really worry about how something's going to do. You put out the best possible product you can, the thing that you find interesting, and then it will find an audience out there. So we're excited for, the release of this book. We've had you talk about it for a while here, but at the end of the show, we always try and do the big sell. So if somebody's watched this interview and they are somehow on the fence about buying this book, which if you're on the fence, you're wrong. You have to go out there. You got to pre-order it. You got to let the publisher know. You got to let Amazon know that they're ready. But Ray, if you can give us one last big sell on the book, tell us why it would be a mistake not to buy Lockup.
Well, I think the main thing is that this is a very different type of book that people are not used to. They're going to find it and they're going to like it. We've got everything in there from illustrations to timelines to graphs to charts, all kinds of things for the fans to sink their teeth into and enjoy, and just to think about wrestling and enjoy their love of wrestling. I think this book is really going to bring this out. It's going to be a nice, fun, casual read. You can bounce around from chapter to chapter and read it as you like. You may be more interested in the Match Hall of Fame or we have a Tournament of Jericho where we're pitting different versions of Jericho from different points in his career against each other and trying to figure out which is the ultimate Jericho. So there's a lot of different things that I think people will be excited about and interested and fun. It'll be a fun book, and it's full of some great illustrations. Our illustrator, Eduardo Romero, did a fantastic job with these drawings. So check it out, and I think you'll be pleased.
And where can the people order it? And where can they find you? And we'll go out on that.
Pre-orders are available on the publisher's website. You can go to mascotbooks.com. Just look for Lockup there, and you can find it. I believe the Amazon link is now also up. So you can find Lockup on Amazon as well. You can find me on Lucha Lockup on the old Twitter machine or X or whatever you want to call it. Just look for me at Lucha Lockup. If anybody wants a signed copy, hit me up there, slide into the DMs, and we can make that happen for you.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for promoting your book here, and good luck with it. I can't wait to read this one, and I can't read the next one.